Nityanandam, I offer my deep prayers and gratitude to my Guru, His Divine Holiness, Bhagavan Nityananda Paramashivam. I just have to say thank you, Ma Pranapriya and Ma Achala Swami, for inviting me to this platform and giving me this opportunity to share with you all the wonderful aspects of sannyas. And most importantly, I would like to think what I have learned living around my Guru, Swamiji. Thank you all once again for inviting me here.
Firstly, we have watched your career in the film industry, whether it is as a 17-year-old as Srivalli, stepping into the cine industry, worked all your way by yourself, or your drive to contribute in the society as a philanthropist, human rights activist in number of NGOs, all of that, or whether your extraordinary will persistence to serve the society as a Hindu monk for the last 11 years. Amidst the fact that you're the most persecuted women of, we have to tell you it is quite an extraordinary than any of the film script or but personally to me and several of us, your journey and the tyaga, the sacrifice that you've demonstrated is so inspiring to all of us. And it is as inspiring as what we could hear of authentic Vedic feminism from Puranas. So I have to ask you this, what really keeps you going? Every day, relentlessly striving so hard in making Kailasa happen for the humanity with the guidance of Swamiji. What really keeps you going?
I'll just put it in a single nutshell. It is Swamiji's Tyaga that drives me or inspires me, because all of us here have experienced Swamiji's Tyaga in different facets. But we who be living around him have seen him go to the extreme in for many people, and that's something that is so inspiring, that even if one of us catch it as a light, as a flame, I feel we can just pass it around to the generations and generations. I just want to share one experience. I mean, this is just one of the things that happens through the day, in a day that's packed 24 hours. I would say if I have to break down Swamiji's Tyaga into stories, you would have 100 stories to tell in a day. And I mean, this is what I see, but there are so many devotees, Swamiji's interacting on a daily basis, who receive his blessings, his grace, his guidance, his relentless patience and infinite compassion that is so. I mean, there is not a language in the world that would actually encapsulate it to say, saying awe-inspiring or exciting. All these we can encapsulate it in a small pill, and that would be Swamiji in its entirety. Like in childhood, I'm sure all of us would have dreams of a real model personality, a person that we would all look up to, who would have all the good qualities that we feel is there in a human being, right? He has to be extremely good, extremely patient, he has to be a great leader, he has to, be able to inspire people, he has to have a great speaking capacity, oratory skills. This would make us as a child look up to, role models or leaders who could inspire. And I think Swamiji fulfills all those dreams I had as a child. Like, if I had a role model, who would it be? And I know from my child, I never had any role model whom I could look up to, who had all the good qualities of a human being. It's become almost impossible till I met Swamiji. And especially his compassion and patience with people is I feel, the need of the hour today.
Totally agreed. Can't add more to what you're saying. One other thing that I would like to ask you, Akka, is I know for a fact that, and I'm sure many of us would attest that throughout your 20 years in film industry, you're one of the most non-controversial actress. Like we've hardly seen you in any of the controversies or rumors or gossips. We have heard so many good things about you, and I'm sure this doesn't come quite easily being an actress. Unless you have consciously worked and demonstrated extreme hard work and discipline in who you believe as and how you want to carry yourself to the society. And when everybody is, especially waiting to write something about ABCD of the film industry, you have ensured that it is extremely clean for last 20 years, and this doesn't come easy at all, and you must have consciously worked for it. For someone like that kind of a track record, not just for 1 or 2 years, this track record has been there always for 20 years. From that position to someone who has undoubtedly faced uncomprehending vicious attack staged by media anti-Hindu elements who crucified your character and dignity as a woman, vilified, shamed and bullied you. How did you handle this? I just wanted to bring out the extremities. Like you worked so consciously being in the film industry and maintain that kind of a track record for 20 years, from that to someone who has faced such a vicious attack staged by media and anti-Hindu elements who extremely violated the character and dignity as a woman. How handle this?
Well, see, one of the things that most, at least for me, I probably believe in this, that most middle class Indians, like I was, come from a very middle class family, who are taught the one thing that all parents teach their children at that point of time is self-respect and how people perceive you, and it's so important for us. Especially my mother would say the two things that she always wanted for us was self-respect in the society and financial independence, so we would never be dependent on anybody. These were the two things she would constantly teach us. And I think the whole ambience of the society when I was growing up was such that everybody, for every human being, self-respect was the only thing we looked at, and that was one of the things that kept us so goal-focused. Because any kind of a rumor or any kind of an adverse remarks about your character would lead to a loss of respect. So loss of self-respect was something that we all firmly believed in. That's why even whether it's the films that we do, the characters that we do, or what language that we spoke on the screen was so important to our ingrained identity. That as a girl, as a woman, for me, my self-respect was the most. Was the only thing that I ever would work towards. In fact, I think in early 2000 or early 2000, me and a few colleagues of mine, like actress Revati and actor Naz's wife Kamila and actress Rohini, we had gotten together and we had started an NGO called Swabhiman, which is again about self-respect for us, because for a woman, for a girl child, for us, it was a collective feeling and it was something that drove us towards that a girl should have as a primary focus in her life self-respect. So from that, when the ground shifted to March 2nd, well, it wasn't really easy from the perspective of uh, sorry. Like there were many things. It's never about you. It's about what people around you go through, whether it's family or actually to say, for me, that time was Swamiji as my bigger concern. Like, why would someone do this to Swamiji? Why would someone do this to me? Or why? There was no answer to the whys. And even though people knew it was morphed, the video was morphed, and there was so much of vicious, malicious, strategically continuous. It was not like just, people talk a rumor and then you've forgotten after 2, 3 days the magazine's carry. It wasn't like that. It was almost, I think, 6 months, at least far as I know, for Swamiji. It's been continuing for almost 10 years or more now. It's been almost like 6 months. Every day you get up to fake news, hate news, I would say. I would not even say fake news. Hate, malicious, vicious, false news that was planted just there to psychologically terrorize you, to threaten you, to intimidate you, to do anything that can break you so you can turn against Swamiji and file a false rape charge. Or they try to use me as a weapon to kill Swamiji. And if, I think many of us, and for me at least, I have no clue what sannyas meant or what the weapons of sannyas would mean to me. Sorry, I'm just give me a couple of minutes. I really need to. Because as I'm talking, I can only think of what the experience, what I felt, and even now, I guess we don't have answers to the many questions, except for it is. We could just say that hate seems to be a very strong emotion that drives a lot of people. Except that I'm not seeing any other reason. But in the initial days, it was just, we were not, I think, we were not even trying to understand it. We were just trying to first take care, protect, especially, I don't know, like you said, it was not something you can ever be prepared for in life. It's not like some bank insurance, a bank account or an insurance policy you take, thinking, oh, in the future I might be vilified, I might be defamed, so let me take an insurance policy ahead, so I'm mentally prepared. It wasn't that. What surprised me in the initial stages before the whole conspiracy and the depth of the conspiracy unfolded to my mind was the intensity of the attack, which is what shocked me. On March 2nd night, I just wrapped up some work in Kerala, and someone called me and said, see, there is some scroll going on Sun TV about Swamiji, so and some actress, you better be careful. I was like, I actually didn't believe it. I was like, what nonsense are you guys talking about? And it's not something I would believe in. And he said, no, you switch on the channel and see. It started with that, and then after an hour or so, I'm just trying to share how things unfolded to me at that point of time. After an hour or so, another friend of mine called and said, see, I think it's best you get out of the country, because, see, Sun TV and Nakiran are very clear that they are going to be naming you, and we do know it's a morphed images, and they have spoken to someone in the inside of Sun TV, the CTOs, and the very close network of the Sun network, Sun group. They are also very clear it is a morphed video, but they are very clear they are out to get Swamiji and they are going to destroy him because, sorry, I didn't even get to ask what was the personal agenda. It was much later on I came to know it was an ideological fight of which we were not even aware of. They're not going to let you go just like that. Don't even think coming back to Chennai. It is safer if you just get out. Stay out of the country for as long as possible. It's safer. Because if you come to Chennai, nobody's interested in hearing the story that, the video is false. Nobody wants to hear you at all. So my best advice to you is just get out of the country. Stay out till things are over. Because if you stay in the country, their plan is to arrest you under a false charge of prostitution and drugs and keep you for a weekend in jail or 1 week in jail and take a false testimonial from you saying, Swamiji raped you and you were raped by him. And then they would arrest him, and their ultimate plan was to kill him in jail, assassinate him in jail. I think that sort of just, let me say, derailed me completely. I was in Kerala and I had nobody. I was actually alone that night because I just finished work and I was planning to travel back to my hometown, which is Chennai, the next day. And all this started unfolding, and I was just being flooded by these things. I was like, but why would someone want to do it? And I'm sure the media would like to hear that, the truth, that the video is morphed and I have nothing to do with it. And Swamiji is my guru and my God, and there is no way, nothing is. You people are so cheap. How can you have such a cheap video and expect me to keep quiet about it? And this friend of mine has been my friend for almost 20-25 years in my lifetime. He said, listen, I am telling you from the best of what all I know. It's best to get out of the country. If it was good for you to come and face the media, I would be the first person standing there with you, talking to them. If anybody wanted to listen to you, I would be there with you. Right. And just so happened that I left the country the next day. I went to US because my sisters were there. Or rather, that was the only other place away from India that I had spent time. Then I was foolishly thinking that, silence is golden, and if we just remain silent for a few days, things would tide over, and then probably we can come out and tell the story that it is not true, the video is not true, it's false, it's morphed, and I have evidence to show that it is morphed, because first of all, the dates, they didn't match. I was not there, I was traveling, and really at that point of time I was doing many things, trying to wrap up my shoots and a few other projects so I can continue with my commitment of being a brahmachari in the Adina, which I wanted to so badly take up in 2009, and I was focused on that. I just thought, okay, if I just keep quiet for a few more days, then things would tide over. And there's also always a respect in silence, is what I assumed. But I was proven wrong, because I cannot imagine someone airing that horrendous, sick visuals for 3 days non-stop on a public platform. And then I thought it would stop, but it didn't. It was again 2 days later, there were some news articles started coming saying that I have said that the video is true. I felt betrayed actually. I felt really betrayed, because my relationship with the media has never been like that. Being an actress especially, you always have some news, then journalist just and write something controversial about you because it grabs the headlines. But for me, my relationship with the media has never been like that. It's always been extremely friendly. So when the news media started coming up with some really completely fake, fabricated stories, first shock was this fabricated morph video. Then I thought, okay, the video is done and that's it. In just few more days, I need to just keep quiet and things will get resolved. Then the media started. See, at that point of time, I did not realize that there was a complete synchronicity between the anti-Hindus and the anti-Hindu media terrorists. Today, I'm really calling them terrorists because of what they have done. From that point of time, I have personally experienced it to me and to Swamiji for no reason actually, other than the simple ideological disagreement they have with Hinduism as such. But one thing I've learned from Swamiji through these years is you don't care whether Hindus appreciate what you're doing or not. You don't bother about anything. You just keep contributing to the society because that's what we're here for. And that's what is going to be what we're going to leave behind. And I think that's what sort of motivates me, especially seeing Swamiji every day in and day out. There was not a single newspaper or media for no glorious reason would just have a diatribe, would have endless discussions about him. I mean, what are you guys talking about? It always puzzles me. You don't even know him. You've never made an effort to interact with him. You've never heard him speak. You've never seen him. You've never experienced Swamiji. You've never spoken to people who have experienced Swamiji in their lives. How much add value he has given to each human being is not something I have ever experienced in my life before. I have seen thousands and thousands and thousands of people being transformed by him, who look up to him, who hold on to him as their life. When you have not experienced him, nor have you heard what he speaks, nor have you even practiced any of his teachings or principles, I used to be very outrageous initially, like, why are they talking? What rights do they have to talk about all these things? But seeing Swami's extreme patience and his compassion towards humanity, he was like, don't worry about it. We are not here for them. I'm here to contribute to humanity. I'm here to make people's life, make a difference in people's life. I'm here to make people experience the true state of bliss. I think that perspective was really shocking because if I was in his place, I would just throw everything to there and say, oh, get lost. I don't need to be living in a society like this, which has no gratitude, which has no... It's so vicious, basically. I will not even say... I don't have any other word to describe it. So vicious and relentlessly malicious, vicious. They just do it just to satisfy their egos. But I have seen Swamiji the last 11 years consistently without giving up. They know we are not here for the few mockeries. There are so many people who need what I can give them. There are so many people to whose life I can make a huge difference. Let's focus on that. I think that is what has kept me sane the last 11 years. And maybe now Hindus may not realize and they may not even want to acknowledge it. I mean, if they realize, they may not want to acknowledge it, and if they may not even realize the depth of Tyaga Swamiji is doing. But time will definitely tell. And that's the time when people are just going to cry for missing him. For me, I personally look at it as something foolish for people to miss when someone like Swami in this planet is alive, is walking in this planet Earth, whose only thought current, only thing he's in this planet is for to be able to contribute to people's lives, make their lives better, to give them better quality of life. And this whole persecution, this attacks on him, the assassination attempts on him, have just made millions of people not experience that. Is actually much more sad for me. And for that, I would work day and night for people to experience Swamiji, so they understand that they are not alone. Their depressions, their suffering, their pain need not exist in their life. If they practice Swamiji's teachings, or just by his grace, they can just walk out of suffering in their life. Of course, the relentless attack on me continued. They tried to, the anti-Hindus and the anti-Hindu guru brigade, I would call them, the mafia, the thugs. They tried their best to intimidate me, to threaten me, to beg me. I think they've done everything possible. They tried to put fear in me, they tried to put greed in me. They did everything possible they could ever try or they could ever think of to try and use me as a weapon against my own guru, Swamiji. And when that failed, they from their side tried to assassinate me. But they will fail simply because I have Swamiji in my life. I have his blessings and his grace.
That is really eye-opening, Akam. And I'm sure, like me, there are many people who are really impressed, to say the least, to hear the perspective that you are giving, not only about what you went through, first of all, and how you faced it, and vis-a-vis how Bhagwan gave you the spiritual strength in such a natural way. And like you said, the obvious response for anybody, reaction for anybody to what anybody in your place, if we had gone through, would have been to hell with the society. And why should I even have to, contribute anything to somebody who does not even have a basic gratitude or even a decency, to so to speak. The kind of vilification and slander that they made you go through, and they made, of course, Bhagwan go through, and all his disciples, especially as a woman, can really relate to what you are saying, because it's something unforgivable. This is one aspect which you shared. I'm really curious, and I'm sure many of us are curious to know. Post the March 2010 persecution video that was used as a massive weapon, and you being used as a weapon against Bhagwan, and with all the reports that were rife in the media, many reports. Some said that you have fled the country, some said that you are hiding in Kerala, some said that you are in some ashram of Swamiji, and some said, pardon me, but some did say that you were a Christian implant into the organization of Bhagwan, and many things, including, of course, even interviews that were written very elaborately in various magazines, especially the Tamil magazines, and at a time when you were not available for comment for valid reasons, as we now know, that you were forced to leave the country in the best interests of not only you, but Bhagwan himself and for the mission. In the face of all this, in fact, I want the viewers to even see some glimpses of the kind of reports, the media reports that were flashed at that time, knowing very well that you would not have an opportunity to defend yourself or even to clarify what the truth is. So, would like to, um, this is a kind of false news, hate speech, hate propaganda, campaign that was carried out, and not like you said, it was relentless, day in and day out, across all newspapers, magazines, television channels. It was literally non-stop, and all here we even had news about your attempted suicide and how the police were hounding for you. That was something that was actually pretty consistently told. I remember, March 2010, April 2010, May 2010. It was that one thing was continuously telecast and printed. Not only these derivatives of the video, there you can see, of course, in all languages also. You had Tamil, Kannada, Telugu, English. I think it was probably, literally all the languages that movies that you have starred in all those languages, they ensured that the defamation campaign and the slander campaign was kept on. And this is some of we saw this across all newspapers and television channels, where the police claimed that they were looking out for you, hounding for you, you were missing, and they wanted to grill you. Specifically relating to this, in terms of what really did the police do to investigate you? What really went behind? What actually happened? Is it possible for you to share about what the police did to you?
Yeah. For me, I was actually at that point of time, I was even surprised the police wanted to talk to me about anything related to the video, because I firmly believe that it was actually nobody's business. If at the end of the day, if anything, it was my family affair at the maximum. So I never even thought the police would be involved in this for any reason. But somehow they seem to have, they had never approached any of my family members or any of us officially. Instead, they started tracking their phone calls. At least a couple of my friends' phones were tracked for days together. Instead, they could just come openly and asked, oh, we would like to talk to her, we would like to hear her side of the story, which they didn't. Instead, they started tracking my friends' phone calls and my family members' phone calls. And after many days of this, them putting out in the media that, she's wanted, the police are looking for her, and she's escaping from state to state. After many days, only we came to know who's even in charge of the investigation. And if I remember correctly, it was my family who tried to reach out to the CID to see how they can put a stop to all this and how we can bring a closure to all this. And initially, there was no response from the police side towards my family. Then, slowly, what they started doing was, on one side, they had externally in the society, they started putting out these false stories of Ranjita is wanted by the police, but she's hiding, she's not able to talk to anybody, or she's telling she will come, but she never turns up. And even these weird stories of Ranjita agrees that the video is true. All these started coming up. That's when my lawyer in Delhi, I remember his name was Mr. Mendrita, through him we had given a public statement and sent it to the Bangalore CID and into the media that the video is absolutely fake, it's morphed, it's false, and when time comes, if required, we can prove it. But as usual, the media did not find that controversial enough to carry the news, is what I thought that time. But it's much later I realized it was not just because it's not controversial, it did not carry, but they were very clear that it's an agenda, it's a propaganda to eliminate Swamiji, and there was no way they would allow for the truth. Similarly, the police were not at all interested, especially Mr. Charan Reddy, who was the IPS officer in charge. He was nowhere close to being interested in investigating the truth, nor in investigating with a neutral perception of finding out even if it's true, if anything isn't true. What he started doing was he started calling my family members and telling them, you know what, we've arrested the Swami and the Swamiji has confessed that the video is true. But then why shouldn't she come and tell the truth? Why don't you tell Ranjita to tell the truth that, and the video is true, or it's okay, she can tell that she was raped by Swamiji. This is how he psychologically was trying to terrorize my family, and through them trying to psychologically put me in a position where I would say what they wanted me to say. They tried that for many, many days. They would call all my family members and say, oh, you come to Bangalore, come and meet me. Then my family would go, wait there for endless hours. Then he would say, we just finished interrogating Swami. And this is what he told. Why don't you tell your daughter or your sister to come and just tell the truth? We're not asking for anything else. You just can just tell the truth that the video is true or that she was raped. Any of these things, we're fine with it. So, and when they came back to me and told this is what the police themselves were saying, Swami himself has agreed that the video is true, so why don't you tell the same thing? Or you tell you were raped. What is the truth? What happened? Why don't you tell? This is how my family came back to me, because I was still away in US. I was not coming back to India in the near future as far as I knew. I did not believe a single word of what Charan Reddy was telling, through my family members or to the media, because one of the things I saw and I firmly believed was the principles of what Swamiji has taught us. He lives by it: integrity, authenticity, responsibility and enriching. And I knew Swamiji would never tell something that is not at all true. Even it was to save his life, I know Swamiji would never say something that was not true. I was like, no way Swamiji would say something like that, and please don't even come to me with these conversations. That's how I stopped my family. But he didn't stop with that. Again, he would call them
extremely sorry for this technical glitch that came in the middle of a really heartfelt, intense sharing. It is really just like to take this opportunity honestly to really thank you, Ma Nityanandamayi Swami. I, we can, I speak on behalf of all the viewers. I'm sure we can really empathize with what you have gone through. It's not easy for you to have to relive and recount this whole persecution that you have been facing and never had an opportunity to speak about it to anyone. Only today we are even getting glimpses of what you have been subjected to, and really it's it's not easy. Definitely it is not easy. The journey, the past 10 years, I'm sure, have not been easy for you. But like you said, the principle for which Bhagwan is standing, that is been the inspiration for you to have really climbed up. Really, what the headlines screamed about the police hounding for you and they wanted to grill you, that would have been just the tip of the iceberg. If you could possibly share with us what you were subjected to by the police, by the investigating officers, what made you have to really flee the country and not be able to come back for so many months? I'm sure there is a lot that is hidden in those few months, the succeeding months, probably the, like you said, the 6 months that succeeded March of 2010. What did you have to go through? What were you subjected to? If we could hear glimpses of that to whatever extent you could share, given all the legal restrictions, and we definitely don't want you to go through more persecution for having shared this. So within those constraints, if you could share with us what was done. Thank you.
I really want to apologize. One is for the technical issues that we had, due to which we had to take a break. And secondly, this is really a very emotional roller coaster ride for me. It's been 11 years, but one of the most vivid memories I have of this was the night when, night or day, I'm not sure, I was in US, it was like midnight around 12:31 or something, when I saw the news Swamiji was arrested. I think that was so shattering to me because I had no idea why police would arrest someone. Because I have been following up on the news, there was nobody they could not find a single person who came out and said, there was no, I mean, I'm probably not putting it properly, but there was no victim who even told them that he even sexually harassed them or sexually made some innuendos that were inappropriate. So when he was arrested without any rhyme or reason, I'm sure, like his millions and millions of devotees, I'm sure they all would have experienced this. It was like the world just fell apart. It was like there was nothing in this world. Sorry. think that moment will live with me forever. At that point of time, I don't know the society, I am sure by that time, with so much of hate media on it. Many people would have really hated me, but I hated myself the most because I felt I was responsible for it because of just by my association. It's not that, see, I just want to clarify this, that the video was completely morphed, but I felt responsible because I started associating myself, being a public personality, being an actor, maybe gave them the leverage, the more footage to able to make this, to take this persecution to this level of what was done. And I had no solution at that point of time. And then coming back to the police, they tried everything. They tried to intimidate me, threaten me, put fear in me. They tried greed. They literally begged me. In fact, when Charan Reddy had come home, I'll just backtrack a little. And after many months, when finally my lawyers and the police, they came to a conclusion that the police are not going to arrest this thing till I come in person and speak to them. I came to India, and the police, of course, came home to so-called interrogate me. Literally, Charan Reddy begged me. He literally begged me. He said, please tell that Swamiji raped you. I really need this case. I really need to arrest him and put him in jail forever. And actually he had the audaciousness to tell me on my face that, oh, you know what, Swamiji told us that the video is true, and you actually seduced him, and you're actually a Christian implant, and you were sent there just to seduce him and bring bad name to Hinduism and to destroy him, to eliminate him. This is what your Swami himself told us. And I really don't know. I think it was just Swamiji's grace that I did not get shaken by a single thing they said, because in my inside of my being, it's not just heart, in my gut, in my being, I knew Swamiji would never lie. That is one of his principles of life, which is so, he stands so unshaking, unmoving, deep-rooted for the principles of what he teaches. So there was no way, even though he told Charan Reddy, an IPS officer who came in uniform with about 10 to 11 other police officers from Karnataka, to just interview me, a single lady sitting there. End of the day, I may be an actress, a celebrated actress, but I'm just a simple citizen of the country. I was just sitting there, and 10, 11 of them come into my house, and they try to intimidate me first through all these false stories they tell on my face. When they realized that could not move me to tell or to lie about Swamiji or to frame Swamiji against any false charges the way they wished, then he started begging me. He was like, please tell that Swamiji raped you. There are so many kinds of I'm not even getting the word. It's called a date rape drug. There's so many kinds of these drugs that such godmen use to rape their devotees, and I literally almost laughed at his face. I'm not a fool who doesn't know if someone is drugged, and when I get up, I would know if I'm drugged. And I have seen Swamiji, I have seen him how he is someone who's giving so much to other human beings, who can do so much good to other human beings. He doesn't need to drug or rape women. There was no way. And I could never believe any of his stories. Almost they spent, I think, about 4 or 5 hours trying to intimidate me, my family, and everybody. But when they realized that there was no way, they could not find a single word or a single phrase from me which they could use me as a weapon against Swamiji, they tried to threaten me. But that's the only good thing that happened was it was in my hometown, in my house. So they really could not do any physically they could not put me in jail and threaten me there. Everything they tried in that 4 or 5 hours, they psychologically terrorized me, my family. They kept my friends and visitors out. They said, you cannot have a lawyer in presence. It is only on these conditions we will even talk to you. And for me, at a point of time, my lawyers also advised me it's best to get over with, then maybe the media will just stop its relentless false stories. But I can never forget that day when 11 officers walked into my house and intimidate me, threaten me, and finally tried to beg me. And when they realized all their efforts in all directions was futile, they left threatening to kill me for not framing charges against Swamiji. And that's when again I had to leave the country in a couple of days. So as I was sharing earlier, Achla Swami, at that point of time, I never understood the depth of the conspiracy, the depth of the strategy, the cunning strategy that the anti-Hindus or the anti-Hindu, anti-gurus had used. For me, that time I was just trying to, stay afloat, swim and be sane and just come out of the whole situation as less damaging as possible. That is what for me at that point of time was. It was just, but the one thing that I was very, very clear on was I would never, ever tell something that is not the truth, which is saying that Swamiji that raped me or drugged me or done any of those nasty things that I have never experienced in and around Swamiji, his living space or in the Adinams or in the number of programs I had attended earlier. Or even just to get out of the situation, or for the people to sympathize with me as a victim of rape, I could never bring down someone like Swamiji. I was so clear about these two things. I think that and whatever spiritual strength that Swamiji had blessed me with earlier before this whole persecution breakout, that is what kept me sane. That is what kept me unwavering on the truth. Because I knew Swamiji would never, ever tell something that is not the truth. That actually gave me the strength to stand by the truth. It was not like I had some great independent will or anything like that. But because I knew he would never waver from the truth, Swamiji would never waver from the truth. That was my grounding, I would say. And then also, even after the interrogation and everything, they tried in many, many ways. They would poison my family and me through very close friends of mine. And being a public figure, I think anybody, especially the political circles and the media circles, they knew who my very close friends were and whom I would listen to, whom I respect, whom I, whatever. even through them, they reached out to me and would say, see, it's easier if you play the victim card. If you just tell you were raped, nobody's going to blame you. The whole hatred would be only against Swamiji. You have a choice, right? Why do you want to face this relentless, malicious nastiness that you're having to face? And think about your family, what they're going through. Actually, my poor pre-monastic parents had to be moved out of our hometown, Chennai, because these anti-Hindus had started attacking my house day in and day out where my parents were staying. They would start pelting stones on my house. They would send thugs to the house, trying to break the windows. So each day, for 2-3 days, this continued. So immediately they were moved out for their safety. They moved out. I had nothing to do with it. So, with so much of collective, I would say, it was, now when I look back, I can see how it was their strategy to try and break and get at least one person who would come forward and tell me, who would frame Swamiji on false charges. And I was their easiest victim because they had already socially dishonored me and I would say shamed me so much. They had isolated me from the society. And that's one thing I find that's so easy to do for a woman is when you shame her, you isolate her. And when you isolate her, it's easy for anybody to carry out their agenda, their propagandas. So when they tried the same and were unsuccessful, and I really have again to say that I had nothing to do with it. It is only through Swamiji's grace and my firm faith in him that got me through this whole murky, this whole persecution, this nastiness, these lies, this shaming they tried, the gender shaming, the name shaming, everything they tried, that kept me sticking to the principle of not falsifying or giving any kind of false testimonial or false complaints against Swamiji. For that, I'm always and I will always be in gratitude for Swamiji, to Swamiji.
As I was listening to you, I was just mentally juxtaposing the whole sequence of events that happened as you are telling, as you're revealing about what Charan Reddy and the police officers tried to get out of you. I can now understand because around that same timeline, so I used to go to every court hearing when Bhagwan was in illegal police custody so that we could know what all the prosecution and the police were trying to do. Actually, honestly, to tell you, I never understood the viciousness and the intensity with which they tried to frame Bhagwan, because at that time, and I was thinking it is all because of the huge, massive media hate propaganda that was being done against Bhagwan, but never really understood, or it was never shown to the world that behind the scenes there was such a much deeper attempt to actually frame him in a rape case using you as a weapon to this extent, where they used fear, greed, using your own friends to poison your family, and use that to make you somehow, like you said, it would have been very easy for you to have just come and made a statement that, okay, it was some kind of a rape attempt, or at least some sexual assault. If we correlate this with all the other things that happened in the legal arena at that time, because it was about at the same time, if I'm not mistaken, where in the courts, where Bhagwan's lawyers, we had filed a quash petition because the case is so baseless, and the High Court judge at that point actually reprimanded the police to say, don't you have any shame to come and tell me that you do not even have one witness statement after interrogating 48 witnesses, and then you say that the charge that you have put against Swamiji is one of rape. How come you do not even have the rape victim? And now can understand, not only for somehow saving their face against a blatantly false case against Swamiji, and that too which had become so popular and so-called high profile. No wonder they were so hell-bent on getting some false statement from you. And secondly, this whole, I'm shocked actually at, honestly, at how a police officer, the opening statement that you made, the police officer, Mr. Charan Reddy, coming and asking you brazenly, somehow we want to put Swamiji in jail forever. Now that's really a shocking revelation, because we have seen all the derivative understandings about what came to us through the media, through various devotees who were subjected to persecution in the name of interrogation, but never something so direct. This is the first time I think the world is hearing about how the police were open about putting Bhagwan in jail forever. And I'm sure now actually I can understand the strength with which they actually put even the rape charge, because probably they were very, very confident that you will be forced to come as a rape victim. They would be successful in bringing you as a rape victim against Swamiji, because already the video was there and there was a huge vilification campaign that was very well sustained by the media mafia and the anti-Hindu terrorists. So it was needless to say, they probably took it for granted that you would come forward as a rape victim. I think, if I may, if you could share more about, after that, the fate of Charan Reddy and the police officers, because we know the legal angle where the police shamelessly brought forth a false fabricated rape victim also. It's a ridiculous, ludicrous rape victim, because she has 4 highly contagious sexually transmitted diseases and all that we know about. And we know that she's actually, she was brought forth because she herself is a conspirator, and she was a beneficiary of the extortion attempts made against Bhagwan. So that is known to the public, but what is not known to people is really what was done to elicit that one magic 4-letter word from you, rape. I'm sure they did a lot more than just come to you and try to beg you or force you or threaten you or even to murder you. Something more, if you could share about 2 things, if I may request. One, which you stopped short of sharing when you said, when you first heard the news of Bhagwan's arrest, and what made you come back to the country to face this interrogation. I'm sure a lot more than just your lawyer's advice that, maybe if you come out with the truth, it would end the relentless false stories being published against you day in and day out. Because every word of what you shared brought out, one, of course, the depth of the living principle that Bhagwan stands for. B, second, obviously the depth to which he had impacted your life for you to stand in the face of that persecution by not 1 but 2 states, Karnataka in the form of the police inspectors Charan Reddy, and Tamil Nadu in the form of the media mafia and the ruling political parties at that time. So something lot bigger, obviously larger than life strength, that was given to you by Bhagwan. If you could share more about, probably the depth of what you were subjected to, and B, what made you stand. I feel it will really help a lot of us to understand many things. One, about what you had to go through, as honestly as not just a lone woman, as as a representative of that Hindu feminism, which Bhagwan was empowering then, is empowering, and will continue to empower. Also to understand the depth of Bhagwan's Tyaga service, what he has made out of you, literally, like, the fruition of all that he stands for, and how you have experienced that. I think I'm going all over the place. I really apologize for that. But as I was listening to you, there were so many questions that came, and I'm sure all the viewers also would love to hear a little more than what you just shared about whether the police interrogation or Charan Reddy, or what gave you that strength to stand up, knowing very well at that point. Today, we know, Bhagwan has made Kailasa happen, but at that time, I'm sure it was not easy. All the insecurities and the fears, and like you said, the concern for Bhagwan, especially because he was in illegal police custody. I'm sorry, I made a question into a whole essay, but if you could address some of that, it would be really helpful.
I totally understand Achara Swami, because I think that is such an emotional. Emotional is a very small word for what all of Swamiji's devotees would have gone through during that time. It's like like I said, when I was in US, in New York, when I saw the news of Swamiji being arrested, I was like, I really had no idea what to do. I just got up, and my sisters were there. I said, just take me out. I want to go out. I want to go out. I want to go out. That was the only thing I would keep repeating. And they were like, in the middle of the night, where do you want to go? I was like, I don't know. I just want to go out. I just want to go out. Just take me out, or I'm just going to start walking. I was like, it is actually very okay. Maybe I can just give a little more background into how I connect with Swamiji. So maybe it's easier for me to come to this. I think before I met Swamiji, I was always I read many books about whether it is, but two books that really touched my heart and made me yearn for having a guru in my life was Sant Jnaneshwar's books, and of course Paramahamsa Yogananda books, Autobiography of a Yogi. It was not just I want to yearn, but it was something that made me go and pray every day to Sai Baba that, I wish I was born when you were there. If there's one thing you can never give me, is like, just give me a guru in my life, this life. And when I met Swamiji, when I practiced his teachings, so when I attended his programs, I felt that that prayers or that seeking was complete. Obviously, I didn't know much about a relationship between a guru or disciple. But what I really felt when I read those two books, and what I was thinking, or my idea of a guru, which Swamiji for me was a complete, I can't say form, but for lack of a better word, let me just say form of is the extraordinary, unjudgmental love, whether we can call it compassion for human beings or patience to us or whatever. I think, or any of these compilations of what makes a guru. Because when I read Sant Jnaneshwar's love for his guru, I could see how his guru must have been giving him so much of love. Again, I would like to say love is a very diminutive word to how you can relate to your guru. It is not a human. It is a common. It is. I will not even say a combination. It is. It's the final outcome of all human emotions, I would say, is your relationship with your guru. Because I knew with Swamiji, he would never judge us, whether the good, the bad, because I have seen him. I've seen how he relates to other people, not just me, but I have seen him relate to so many people that normally we would be responding differently. People who have backstabbed him, people who don't have much respect for what Swamiji's teachings or what he stands for also. But he never lets that waver his commitment towards people. Even before the 2010 persecution, I have seen that. So for me, it was not just it was a culmination of Swamiji is a culmination, like I said earlier, a culmination of everything good in this world, and I felt that if I have to say, sorry again, if I had to put Swamiji as a very materialistic sense, if I say a thing or a principle, if there is anything left if there's anything in this world that for me, and I'm sure many of his devotees resonate with me, is if anything in this world is really worth saving, or really worth living for, was Swamiji and his principles. There was nothing more for me at that. And when that one component in my life was arrested for no reason, I felt that the world has ended and there was nothing more, there's nothing worse that can happen. I don't know if I'm really able to express clearly. For me, that was like, if the world ended that day, I don't think I would be a person who would say, oh, the world ended before my time, I wish I had some more time. And that is how I felt. Because I just felt it is so not fair to do to someone like Swamiji. I have been an actress. I have seen so many human beings, so many people, different kinds of people, how we respond to situations. I've seen even the best of men outside my own profession respond with some kind of judgments, with some kind of defense systems or different ways. But I have seen Swamiji only sacrifice himself continuously just for even one person, if he feels that that person's completion or that person's enlightenment is what they are here for. Their relationship with him is just a guru-disciple relationship. Then I have seen Swamiji, even, oh God, go to the extremes. I've seen him not eat, not sleep. He will never bother about anything. He will sit endlessly to make the disciple understand day in and day out what it means, why, what, who, how one should live life, how we should be without violence. It is not just with the sannyasis, or I've seen that with Swamiji. So many devotees from outside come with their family problems, with their siblings, or whether it's with their own daughters and sons. People who have not helped him in any way, who would just come and spend endless hours with him and say, okay, I need advice, can you help me here, can you help me there, can you take care of this? And Swamiji, he would always smilingly say, yes, I'm there, don't worry, I'm there to take care. And that amazed me when I was attending programs. How can a person be like this? It's just impossible. But then, of course, Swamiji is the possibility, and he shows that it is possible for human beings to be continuously good. And when that most precious thing, I don't have a better word than precious at the moment, but the only thing that the world needs, I deeply believe, is Swamiji and his teachings. And when that is no longer there, then I see no reason for the world to exist, was what I felt at that point of time on the night Swamiji was arrested. But even in this, I think from the time he was arrested till I came to India, it was almost another 40 days. Till I came to India to face the CID's interrogation, it was, I think, another 40 days or 50 days. I think every night I would feel Swamiji's presence with me. It is only after that I would even close my eyes. It is not just presence. I would feel his physical presence, just sitting there and taking care and healing me. That was what I would find most amusing. If I thought of it, that is, if I had to think of it now, like, he's going through so much. There was no need for him to, just because I was praying for him or I was praying to him, there was no need for him to take the time to heal me. Nobody was going to hold him hostage for it, saying that, oh, when I was going through it, you did not come and help me. That was not the situation. But he did. And I know it was not just for me. He would have done that. He would have done for each and every one of his devotees, each and every one of his disciples who prayed to him, who were pained by what happened. So it was this deep spiritual experience, the mystical experience, the spiritual experience, that even gave me the courage to come back to India and face this CID. Although I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but at that time I was totally nervous. I was just waiting for the day to start and to end, and the middle was like, I don't know how I'm going to do anything. I don't know what, but I was very clear that I was never going to frame Swamiji, but I didn't know what to expect or how the whole thing was going to pan out. And like I said